Hey y'all, welcome to Adventures with Aggie, brought to you by Coco's Coffee House. Today we have our second episode of our coaching series, and we're featuring Rainer Meisterjahn. He's a mental performance coach who works with basketball players, originally from Germany, and he played basketball in Germany as well before moving to the US. So please welcome Rainer.
Rainer, how are you doing today?
Good, good. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. I'm so excited to be able to share your story with my listeners and get to know you a little bit better. But let's just start with your background. Can you kind of tell me who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Germany, currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. We just moved out here back in August, actually. But I can take you all the way back. Again, born in Germany, lived there for about 20 something years probably. Still have, a bunch of family back there, go back a few times a year. And initially it started out, in high school, I got into psychology a little bit. We had some options that, in the school system there. Was an athlete from a young age, got into basketball, like right around the time I was 13, I want to say 13, 14 maybe, and just fell in love with it. Eventually decided to come over to the States. Played in high school up in Vermont for a year, went to a small high school up there. Eventually ended up in Maine, played some college basketball and started kind of dabbling in sports psychology at that point. And then from there, did some, coaching over in Germany for a year, played for a semi-pro team for a little bit, and then decided to go back to school for my master's and then eventually my PhD in sports psych and kinesiology, and then started my business a couple of years after that. So it's been a long journey, lots of education, lots of ups and downs, but some really cool experience for sure. So that's where we're at today.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Lots of education and lots of moving. I feel like back and forth a little bit, and that's so cool. But I guess I always like asking guests this, but why basketball? Like, why was this your thing?
I don't know. I just fell in love with it. I actually started out. I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time we talked, but I started out in equestrian sports. My dad is really into it. It's what I did as a young kid and was like really competitive at it. Competed against adults. Used to jump horses actually at a pretty solid level. Get into soccer a little bit, but when you're German, you got to at least give soccer a try. And it resonates with most kids. For some reason, I didn't really like it that much, and then had a chance to start playing basketball with a few kids at my school that would just play street ball, play some 3-on-3, and we'd play in gym class a little bit, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And I think a lot of it was the culture too. That this was back in the like mid 90s, and then leading into the 2000s. Basketball was kind of a big deal, like all over. Back home in Germany and Europe, everybody was wearing their Bulls hats. Jordan was big. And so it was a lot more than just the sport. It was just a whole culture that I kind of fell in love with. And I just never looked back from there, and to this date. I mean, we deal with other sports in Courtex sometimes, and it's a lot of fun, but basketball is clearly number one for me.
Definitely. I played my one season of basketball. I think I made one shot in the whole season, but that's okay. I tried. It was not my thing, but that's okay. We bounced back. Awesome. Let's kind of talk about how you got into the psychology space. What about mental fitness kind of sparked your interest?
Well, like I said, I was an athlete in college, and I like psychology, period. I was interested in the way people think. I was interested in behavior. I was interested in relationships, those different types of things. And then I started realizing that, hey, like I can actually combine those two things into an actual career path. And as an athlete, I was always the type of athlete that was really, really good at going really hard. So I would say on my basketball team in college, I was always the most in shape. I mean, I would just, I'd be up, at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, probably lifting weights or something while everybody else was maybe sleeping off a hangover. Not to exaggerate, but you know what I mean? So that was me, but I wasn't good at navigating the pressure. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I dealt with a good amount of performance anxiety, I would say. So all the physical work I put in, it was really hard sometimes to translate it because the pressure and anxiety would kind of get in the way of my development. And so now I have the tools, and now they at best help me, playing a decent game in a men's league or something. But but I can pass it on to players that still have a career ahead of them.
Awesome. Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you're doing now. So how did Courtex Performance begin, and what's the kind of the mission, and what do y'all do?
Yeah, so we started back in 2013 officially. I initially, coming out of graduate school in 2011, when I finished my PhD, I was looking into academic jobs. Thought I wanted to teach at a university. Had a couple of opportunities that fell through kind of at the last minute, and then eventually I was like, all right, let me just try to start my own thing, and that's what I did. And I guess one of the things I'd also looked into was trying to get into the NBA, and that's really hard to do at a young age, if you don't have a ton of connections. And I had a chance to do some stuff with the Milwaukee Bucks a couple of years after finishing my doctorate, but it just didn't really gain much traction to where it led to a full-time job or anything like that. So then I was like, all right, like let me just start Courtex, and that's what I did. Started out super small, a couple of clients, partnered with the local basketball facility to help out some of their athletes, and really went in pretty naive, I would say, but with a lot of excitement, just trying to make something happen. So at this point, like, our mission really is to be the dominant player in the basketball mental performance space, and make basketball mental training proactive, make it systematic, really customize it to the different athletes and coaches we deal with, and then also have an impact at an organizational level when it comes to dealing with NBA or WNBA organizations, for instance, or a lot of the overseas teams and athletes we deal with.
Definitely. I had Bone Collector on the show a few weeks ago, and he was telling me that the reason that he plays the way that he does now is because he used basketball as like a getaway, like an escape. And so he was working on his mental performance without knowing he was working on it. And he was solely focusing on his game and just how he was playing. And that was when he was like 10 years old. So I think that's so crazy to hear how some people do it and don't know that they do it. And then some people need that training to figure out how to work on their mental performance. But that was really interesting to just hear his perspective and how far that he's come now. He's I think he's 40, and that's been 30 years of mental performance training without knowing he was doing it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And just one quick thought on that. But what's interesting to me is that a lot of the time when we're younger, when we're kids, we use a lot of the tools that then over time we kind of forget about, and then we come back to them through mental training. So as a kid, visualization is a big deal because your imagination is so much more creative. So getting out in the driveway and pretending you're Kobe and like counting down the seconds and hitting that shot, like that type of play, we sort of get away from it as sports become a bit more serious in high school, college, and then the pros. But that stuff is awesome. Like, it really helps.
For sure. I think at home, at least driving through my neighborhood in Alabama, the amount of times I see little boys wearing LeBron jerseys or something like that, it's so cute. It's so fun because they're doing that also without knowing they're doing it. But that's great. I guess let's talk about kind of the strategies. You already mentioned little kids and their imagination, how they need that. But what strategies and exercises do you kind of teach these professional basketball players to work on their mental performance?
The one thing that we always start out with our clients is core value development, and it's been done in a lot of different contexts, and it's almost an overused term in a way when we talk about core values, culture, those different types of things. But what we try to do is make it really creative, make it really, really tangible. So we help our athletes figure out what their core identity is when they're on the court. So if they say, hey, like, one of the things that I really pride myself on is my competitiveness, then I want to know, what does that look like in action? What are the specific basketball plays, actions, behaviors that I want to look for to be able to then evaluate whether or not you're living up to your core value of competitiveness, right? So we start out with that as a foundation, and then we also look at a lot of I guess skills that we build out around our focus cueing, for instance. So when you have those core values, it's always nice to have them going into a game. Everybody always goes in with the right intentions, but then, adversity hits, you maybe start out with a couple of missed shots, a couple of turnovers, and before you know it, you kind of forget about your plan going in. So that's where we bring in these focus cues, such as associating the core values with specific colors that you might see on the court. So every time you look at the red on the shot clock, for instance, it automatically serves as a reminder to check in with yourself on your execution of your competitiveness. For instance, we also do a lot with behavioral cues. So how can you use your body language and your kinesthetic behaviors to cue things that you're looking to do? So like some athletes, they might clap their hands one time in order to lock back in. Or I used to have an athlete that would really get down on himself when he'd miss some shots. So he wrote on his sneakers, eyes up, right? And then in combination with that, he would tap his chin, again, as a reminder to correct himself. So we do a lot of those type of things, along with more traditional sports psychology skills, such as pregame visualization. We do a lot around mindfulness and meditation as more of a general day-to-day stabilizer to help athletes find balance. And those are just a few of the things that we tend to teach.
Definitely. I wonder what my cues are, like that I don't know if I do something like that to try to focus myself that I'm not aware that I do. Like, I don't think I clap to myself regularly, but something like that. I feel like there's, I don't know, something that I might do. I don't know how I'd figure that out though. Is that something I don't know what my follow-up is to that, but I guess like, do you watch them play and like notice what they're doing and then figure out how to tailor that into mental performance? Or I guess, how does that kind of start?
Yeah, so with some of our athletes, especially with, say, our NBA players, for instance, or like our higher level clients, part of the packages that we have with them include game analyses. So yes, I do watch game film, and in some cases, I actually track behaviors. So if the player's key, like if one of their self-identified key behaviors is that clapping, I track how many times per game they do it, and I pay specific attention to when they do it, and does it help them to reset and refocus. And on the flip side, we might also track negative behaviors that get in the way of focus, such as how many times per game do you hang your head, or get on the rest or something.
Sure. Awesome. Next question for you. I just kind of want to hear your take on why it's so important for athletes to work on their mental game as much as it is on their physical fitness and things like that. I feel like mental health and mental fitness and mental performance, mental everything is so common to hear about within this last year. I feel like everybody's trying to figure out how to help themselves mentally in whatever way that may be. So I guess I just want to hear why it's so important for athletes to work on this as well.
Well, it's because it all goes hand in hand. If you have it, you could have the best physical skill set in the world, and you could be the strongest, fastest, whatever. But if at the end of the day you struggle focusing consistently, if anxiety gets in the way, those type of things, then obviously you can't fully take advantage of the physical skills you have. I mean, that goes for all of us in life. You don't have to be an athlete, but it is, even in your role, when you're hosting a podcast, you could be, a very strong public speaker. You could have great facilitative skills. You could be very creative. But again, if you get too anxious to where you just don't even feel comfortable using those skills, well, you're not going to do very well at what you do, right? So then that's how we look at it. I mean, it all goes hand in hand, and vice versa as well. You can have great mental skills if you have all the confidence in the world and you're great at focusing, but you really suck at basketball. It's not going to help you either. So.
Right. Balance. I feel like that's another word that has happened in the last year. Everybody's trying to find their balance and whatever it may be that they're good at or they want to be good at, or even balancing stress with other things that they're trying to make less stressful, I guess. Balance. I feel like I listen to so many podcasts and watch shows or whatever. And at the beginning of this year, it was like, what's your word of the year? You know, like everybody tries to do like 2021 word of the year. The amount of times that I heard balance was crazy. But I don't know, maybe that should be mine. I don't know. But awesome. I guess let's move into what's the most challenging piece of teaching mental performance and trying to get athletes to understand why this is important if they're not on that page already.
Well, I think starting out, it's always a matter of, moving athletes away from what the kind of the stereotype is when it comes to mental performance. You know, a lot of athletes come in with a bias thinking that it's only for players that have a significant problem. And it's really not. So really getting them to understand that this is something that ought to be done proactively, just like you hit the weight room consistently throughout the year, and not just when you're feeling really, really weak. So that's the starting point. That's the initial challenge that we have to bridge sometimes. And I feel like it's starting to get a lot easier. More athletes, more coaches and organizations are starting to really open up to mental performance. So that's been exciting. And then I think beyond that, you really have to figure out how to customize it to the individual, because every athlete, every coach that we deal with, they're all so unique. We're all unique as human beings. So you can't come in with a cookie cutter approach. Sure, we have a philosophy, we have certain models that we teach, but then within that, you got to figure out how much structure does an individual athlete actually need and like, and at what point do they find a mental skills training approach overbearing if it's too structured for their taste. How much feedback and guidance do they need versus how much do they prefer to kind of figure things out on their own. It's truly fascinating, because a lot of the time when I deal with, and I talk to young aspiring mental coaches, they come in kind of with this mindset of this can be done like you do, say, mental health counseling, where you have nice 1 hour time slots that you can put athletes in, and they're going to show up at the same time every week. It just doesn't work like that. Get so many different personalities, different schedules. It's messy, but exciting at the same time.
Definitely. I should have asked you this earlier, but can you explain the difference between mental health and mental performance? Because I feel like people listening to this might not know that, and a lot of people use it interchangeably too. Sometimes I do as well. But yeah, can you just explain the difference in those?
Yeah, I look at it as kind of on a continuum almost. So if you picture a 10-point continuum of mental functioning, so to speak, on the low end, you have mental health, which a lot of the time that's where you look at clinical issues like depression, substance abuse, maybe some of the real heavy stuff that we all deal with in life, in different in different ways. On the high end, at a 10 on that scale, you're looking at peak performance. And that's kind of where we do a lot of our work, is really helping athletes and helping people thrive. Kind of in that mid space, you have, in my opinion, you have some overlap, and that's where we're looking at mental wellness and this idea of just life skills, period. Right. So managing yourself as a person, finding a degree of balance, like you said, and a degree of happiness in your life, and finding some stability, and then you can build that elite and peak performance on top of that.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that helps a lot. Awesome. So next question is more tailored towards you. How do you work on your own mental performance? Do you have some kind of routine every day? I know I try to have a routine every day with meditation and journaling and things like that. But yeah, what do you do?
So in the mornings when I get up, typically what I do is I have a routine of drinking 2 bottles of water, because hydration is super important for me, because the more I hydrate, the more focused I am, the less I crave food, which if I can push back my first meal to later in the day, like I do intermittent fasting these days, it actually really helps me with my energy, I've found. So starting out with that, from there I go into doing meditation. Right now I'm doing Headspace, so I do about 12 minutes of Headspace every morning, and then also write down 3 things in an app that I use called Done, D-O-N-E, which is just a basic task management sort of app. And I write down 3 things that I'm looking forward to that day. So even if I'm feeling low, I struggle with my energy. Maybe I didn't sleep well, so I come out with sort of low energy. Like, all right, like what are 3 things I can get at least somewhat excited about today? Then at the end of the day, I always reflect back and write down 3 things that I'm thankful for. So I do kind of a gratitude, kind of mini gratitude journal, if you will, right? And couple all of that with just regular exercise. So, I hit the weights about 3-4 times a week, plus some cardio, some basketball. So that's basically it. I'm always trying to figure out how to fine tune it still, because I feel like I could do more sometimes. So it's something that I haven't gotten too stagnant with, and I also haven't figured it all out. I still deal with anxiety sometimes. I still, sometimes procrastinate. We're all human, I guess. So I'm always trying to figure it out.
Definitely. The last time I talked to you, I remember you said the 2 water bottles each morning. I definitely Googled that afterwards. I was like, should we be drinking like a lot of water in the morning? Because I was like, that's something that sounds so easy that does have a lot of benefit to it. And I have been trying that since the last time. I don't know when the last time was that I talked to you, maybe a month ago or something. But I don't get 2 bottles in, but like a decent amount of water at least every morning. And I think it does help. I've been doing it for a few weeks now. And that's something, like I said, so easy, that's people just don't realize that does help so much. But that was one of the takeaways. I took away a lot of things from our other talk, but that was one of the ones that I actually put into action.
Great.
But awesome. Cool. So last question for you. I end all of my shows on advice. So what is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
My younger self, I would say start practicing the things that you're doing now at a much younger age. I probably honestly should have started when I was as young as 10, 12, 14. I don't know. I used to be a pretty emotional kid. I used to, like I said, struggle with a lot of performance anxiety. So put some of those skills into use and invest in mindfulness, invest in your mental and emotional well-being recovery as much as you invest in getting after it physically.
Definitely. That's awesome advice. I love it. Awesome. Well, Rainer, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and explaining mental performance, because I don't think people know what it is all the time. They say it, but maybe they don't know what it is. But thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Aggie. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, awesome.
Rainer, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tune in on Friday morning to hear from Richard James, former Jamaican Olympian and current strength coach.